is Parenting for the Everyday, a podcast dedicated to meeting parents in the trenches of parenthood. We explore how our faith fits into our parenting. With the help of our guests, we are seeking practical tips on how the gospel can speak into our day-to-day parenting. From the easy stuff to the hard stuff, we want to talk about it all. This is Parenting for the Everyday. I'm Becca Alvarez.
And I'm Holly Dyke-Andrew. And today we are talking about that parent-child relationship, loving our kids when our kids don't have the same belief system or faith system that we hold so valuable. So when our kids choose to live outside of the gospel and make choices that affect their lives because of that, kind of what do we do? So we have Pastor Joe and Karen in the studio with us, and we're so grateful that you guys are willing to.
Best guess.
The best. You're a little bit biased.
Thank you.
But just, walk us through kind of what that would be like. Beck and I feel a little ill-equipped here, so we're hoping you guys have all the answers for us.
Well, Holly, I wanted to start by just saying this is a really hard topic, and it breaks my heart for parents who are struggling with whether it's an injured relationship with their children or a broken relationship. And I just want to say that we hurt for you, and we have some concepts. We don't know what the individual situation is going to be, but we'd like to have a discussion about it. So that's our hearts as we enter this very difficult situation and conversation.
Thanks for that. We're really grateful you guys are here. I think parenting comes with a lot of expectations, and you kind of think like, if I do this, then this is going to happen. And that has proven to be completely false in my parenting journey. I can speak for personal adventure, my personal experience, that it doesn't work like that. And so oftentimes I feel like we're living in this gap of what we thought was going to be and what is. And so, how do we handle that? How do we walk through that? What should our frame of reference be? Talk through that a little bit.
I think that's a really tricky thing, because whenever we talk about expectations and then reality, we always say that gap has a name, and that gap is disappointment most of the time. I mean, with parenting, sometimes you get good surprises, but most of the time that's what we call the gap. And I think the really tricky thing is to be disappointed in the behavior of a child, no matter if they're 3 or 30, but not communicate that they're a disappointment. Those are two different things.
Oh, yeah.
And that's, I mean, at my age, it's hard. If somebody tells me that they're disappointed with something that I have done, I will still interpret that as I am a disappointment to them. So that means that every time you have to say it to your kids over and over again, even though they're not going to believe it, they're not going to be able to differentiate it, I would still say it. I would say, I'm disappointed in your behavior, but I want you to know you're not a disappointment. I love you. I will always love you. So that's at least one thing I would try to, because it's so hard to be disappointed and not bleed out disappointment on your kids, and then your kids then feel like there's hardly anything more powerful than a parent's disappointment, or a parent communicating that a child's a disappointment. That's not a I don't know, what is that, a noun? That's saying
it's such an identifier.
Yeah.
So that then seeps right into the foundation of an identity, which is a tough one to build off of. What are some, that right there kind of even addresses this next question, but what are some common mistakes parents make when trying to fix their wayward child? And I think that we can kind of open this question up of a wayward child, again, being anything from 3 to 30. You're going to experience a lot of different behaviors, positive and negative, in your child's life in that time. So what are some mistakes that parents make?
I'll give a broad answer, and then Karen, you can see if you can make this more specific.
No pressure, Karen. Go, Mom.
But I was thinking, it doesn't matter if your child's 3 or 30. I think the mistake that parents make is that we look for leverage to change a child's behavior, and choosing the wrong thing to leverage is the mistakes we make. So I think with a 3-year-old, and like with our kids, Becca, you know this, our all 3 of you were different. If I chose to use the same leverage on you as I did for your older brother, then it might be crushing for you, right? I think with adult parents or adult children, I think parents have the same need to cry out for the same wisdom of trying to, when you're looking for leverage, to try to impact them, to not choose the wrong leverage. And there are a lot of wrong leverages out there.
Can you give some examples of wrong leverage?
That was what I was going to say. That's what I'm giving to Karen. So.
Well, I think that was a great answer. Yeah. I think there are a couple things that come to mind. One is using manipulation to try to fix. And I want to just say I don't like that word. I don't think as a parent our role is to fix our kids. I think our role is to help them grow to be the best they can be in their personality, in their likes and dislikes. And so by saying fix, we're inferring that they're broken. Yeah. And what we're talking about here are more like, I think what we're talking about is more like a life choice or an opinion versus personality qualities or character qualities. So I think manipulation through guilt. I think there's a question coming. I'm just going to jump on it of what about a parent feeling like they failed? And I think that goes kind of in this same category. If the parent when the parent loves their child, when I love my children, I don't think I would put that on them, that guilt that I feel, because then that puts the onus on me. That means I had them to make me feel a certain way, and they're not doing it, and therefore I'm disappointed or sad, or and so I think part of that's going to be a communication of eliminating certain words from your vocabulary. However, I can remember specifically a difficult conversation I had with all three of you kids. And I feel like it was, this is what I see, this is my concern, and this is the last time I'm going to say anything about it. So in that, they know my feelings and they know my opinion, but it's not something that I'm going to hit them over the head with. And I think that's where maybe if a relationship starts to splinter or pull away, it's because that whatever the topic is, if it's faith, if it's sexuality, that becomes the tension every time you're together. And that's just not healthy.
Yes, that's really wise.
Yeah, it's really wise. I think that's really hard, though. Like, I even was just thinking, like, man, there are little choices that I want to, every time I see it, say, remember, do you see this consequence? And what I'm hearing you saying is I need to stop that.
Well,
choose to a degree. Yeah.
Choose your poison.
Yeah. And it seems like I would assume that those conversations happened with us at older ages,
right.
So at an age where we're not peers by any means, but we're looking a little bit closer eye level, and you're able to kind of speak into our lives. That wouldn't happen when I was like 12.
With an 8-year-old, where you're right.
Right.
I think one of the things that motivates a bad response from a parent to an adult child is I remember somebody reading somewhere that that your capacity for love is connected to your capacity for pain. So, like when a 13-year-old says to their parents, "I hate you," it's because the parent has inflicted some pain, and they don't have a great capacity for pain. So their thing is to respond like that. As a parent of adult children, there are things that could cause you pain. Your capacity for pain needs to grow so you can absorb that, and not like one of the reasons that we tend to hit the same nail, Holly, you said it, is part of it is that I want the child to get better. Part of it is that's the way I deal with my own frustration and pain. And that's true of all my relationships. So to me, as I grow older, I think one of the things parents have to do is be praying for a greater capacity to absorb pain, because to be quiet means that you suffer alone. You let it out, you at least, it feels like at least you have somebody else in pain with you.
Yeah.
It's the person
Come down with me. Yeah.
Right. And that's a different feeling. So I think that's one of the things too. I see in parents, and I see it in relationships all the time, but with parents of adult children, the capacity to absorb, and we haven't gotten there yet, but like I've sat with parents whose adult children have come out and said, I'm gay. And one of the ways there are two ways they get out of pain that causes them pain. One way is to say, I will abandon what my faith says so I can just love my child, and then I'm no longer in pain. The other way is to say, I will cling to my faith and reject my child, and I'm no longer in as much pain, right? The hard thing is to stand in the midst of biblical tension and say, I love you to my child, and I love Jesus, and those two things I will sit in with you. And to be able to communicate that to a child is a very powerful thing. It's a very, very difficult thing. I found few parents who've been able to do that.
And would you say that you're born with a capacity for pain, or is that something that can be developed?
Oh, it has to be developed. I don't think anybody's born with it.
Yeah.
I think that's why your kids are not, your kids do not like pain. Like your kids are in the maximum, any kind of discomfort, they will just go berserk, right? That's because they haven't learned yet. So then I think the thing about it, I think a lot of times people quit increasing their capacity. When their kids move out of the house, it becomes, I think a lot of us stall right there, because when your kids are in the house, you almost have to develop that muscle, because it is always in your face. Your kids are always there.
And they're always painful.
Oh gosh, yeah.
I was just about to say, well, that's...
Yeah. But when they move out, then it becomes, then you don't increase. I don't think you don't have as much exercise really of that. Muscles increase with exercise. So I think that's part of it.
Okay, Pastor Joe, you're talking about, I think, this balance between love and truth, or grace and truth, right? And I mentioned this in the beginning, but in every other area of my life, when I work really hard, I know where I'm going to end. And in order, I think, to stand in this space you're talking about between grace and truth, I have to surrender that notion. And that just feels really hard. And I almost feel like it's something that I have to do daily, and I'm not even in issues that maybe we're talking about yet. So I don't know, walk us through that balance and how you do that well.
Now, are you saying that if you work really hard, then you get the result that you anticipate?
In every other area of my life, that's what I found to be true.
Yeah. Yeah, and the problem is when you're dealing with another human being, that variable messes that whole equation
up. And sometimes the harder I think I'm working, I am creating a bigger problem in parenting.
Sure. Part of my, one of the things I go back to, I think, a lot is the story of the prodigal son in Luke 15, because I assume, and I think everybody does, that dad was really a good dad. And he had two problem children.
Yeah.
And in the story, Jesus is saying that dad is God. And he had two disappointing kids.
Yeah.
In different ways. And he responded to both of them in an interesting way. But part of it helps me to deal with saying there's a lot of pressure being a parent. I mean, being a parent is so complicated. I mean, it is. And I love that you guys do a podcast on this, and it's parenting in the everyday, because every day it's something. But for me, to have that overwhelming responsibility, but also to know that the main story in the Bible about a dad is a story where both his sons ended up somewhere different than he wanted them. And he responded to them with tremendous grace. Yeah. One came back one stayed out of the party. So to me, that helps me. I also think that we tend to think we have to get it all. If we get it all right as a parent, then we'll get the result that we want. And you have to get rid of that idea. That's just not true.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's almost like a daily surrender of like, Lord, you're writing their story.
Right.
I can be faithful, but I have no control over their heart and where they land.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's key too, Holly, what you said is I can be faithful, because it puts the responsibility on us to be healthy. We have to maintain our own spiritual life. And one thing that came to mind when you were talking is just the importance of the marriage relationship and how we help each other during difficult times. Say a difficult time for me, Joe will be clear thinking and help me through, and perhaps, the other would be true. And I think sometimes the marriage relationship can go awry because maybe there's blame, or maybe there's things that are said in the midst of that pain that are hurtful, and so then the marriage isn't strong. So I guess one thing I would suggest would be to maintain your spiritual life, including worship and prayer and reading your Bible, and then maintain your marriage, and look out for what you say in terms of blaming each other or saying, "Oh, your father's going to be so mad when he hears that." Not using words to speak for the other person, but having a united front. And we used to say that when we had teenagers too. Always united front. Don't want the kids to think they can get away with something from one of us and not the other.
But it is helpful with you when you have two parents. I don't know. I know that there's some people listening who are probably single parents. That's really hard to be grace and truth both in the same person at the same time. It was always good for us where if one was strong on truth, the other might temper it with grace. If one is too much grace, one might temper it with truth. Becca, you don't know how many times you were saved by your
I just was about to ask, can I guess which one was which?
There's so many things about that, and that is so good and such good reminders. I think that really that surrender that you're talking about, Holly, is so important. There's nothing has been something that has sought after my identity more than the moment I became a mom. I feel like I've had a lot of contenders that have tried to sneak in, but it's like every day thinking that my son's behavior or their cuteness is not a direct reflection of who I am for positive and for negative. And I think that just, I'm guessing, kind of increases as they get older. Because right now it's all good stuff. As it gets older, I think it can be really, really tough to not feel like this is who I am based on their behavior. And that's kind of what you were talking about, Mom, as far as like even taking out the language of I'm a failure if XYZ happens, or if my kid doesn't go to college, or my kid doesn't play this sport or that sport, like it makes me a failure. I think eliminating that as a whole can be helpful for parents.
Yeah, Holly, your daily surrender thing is, I think, probably a huge key to everything, just because you can't zero in on a single issue with this whole discussion. So I think a daily surrender allows God then to do what He wants to do inside of you on that particular day, whether it's trying to rip away your identity from them. The more your identity is connected to your children when they're small, the more problems you'll have when they get older. That's the thing with the parenting that I think took me by surprise. Is that parenting continues and your desire for your kids doesn't abate when they leave. Like, we always say that, you have from 0 to 18 with your kids. Well, I always think back to the adage where somebody said, if you want to learn to love something, buy a dog. If you want to give your heart away and never get it back, have a child, have a baby. And that's true. So.
Yeah. One thing I hear is when you're this tension that we've been talking about is keeping that relationship intact. So not, if you go all truth, this is this, then you lose the ability for them to hear you ever. And so how do you what are the practicals? How do you keep that relationship open?
That's a great question. Of course, it's one I've thought about as we prepared for this, just because it's so important. I think making home a safe place. I think, like I said earlier, once you make your kind of opinion known, don't have it be a conversation every time, and try to use language that is encouraging and comforting. And one thing, too, that I read was watch out what you say, like maybe to others in their presence, or even posting on social media. And of course, this could be a whole nother topic too, of your opinions, whether it's politically or again, sexually. Just be careful what you say, because even if it feels like your children aren't paying attention, they're paying attention. Back when our kids were teenagers, I was a big fan of a writer named Chap Clark, and he wrote a book called Hurt. And in his book, he said, just be careful that you don't overreact when your kids say something, because what will tend to happen is they'll quit talking to you. And I think that's true in this situation too. And if they quit talking to you as a teenager, often they'll go underground and you won't know. As an adult, you just won't know. And I always want to be the person that my kids will come to if they're hurting. And that makes me, it requires me to be open and open to them.
I always think with the Luke 15 story too, if your child has gone to a distant land, whatever that means, you have to still create a home that if they come to their senses, it's the place they want to go. At some point when that kid came to his senses, the prodigal son, he thought, the only place I know to go is home. And that'll be a good place, somehow. And so I think that part of it is you have to always, the way you stay in contact is, what Karen said, one, you don't always beat the same drum. You don't respond to your hurt by hurting them back. What you say is, you can always come home. And you can communicate that in a bunch of different ways. And you have to communicate it in a bunch of different ways.
If you guys could go back and encourage your younger self as a parent, what would you say? You're like in the thick of it with one of your perfect children.
For me, I would say I would try to be more aware of the present. I would just say enjoy this day, because I think parents sometimes are as guilty as kids. When I was a kid, I always wanted to be older. Couldn't wait till this time and couldn't wait till this time. And I think as parents, sometimes you end up going, man, when they finally get old enough to go to school, I'll have some semblance of a life for a few hours while they're in school. And then you think when they get to be this age, so for me, I would just focus on where they're at right now at this particular time, because Karen was much better at that than I was.
Thank you. I have to echo that. Yeah, I think just being present, I think being less worried about the details or the clean rooms, and just being in their lives and getting to know them as an individual. I think getting to know their likes and their dislikes, and not trying to make them a certain way, but letting them find out who they are as God created them.
That's good. That's a good reminder. I know there's probably some people listening who feel kind of hopeless with those broken relationships that you're talking about, or just a child that they feel like is so lost and hurting. As we kind of wrap up our time here today, what do you want them to hear from you guys?
Yeah, I think there have been times in our home where we had some concerns, and one thing that really was helpful for us was praying together. We would pray together at night before we would go to bed, and a simple, not a big religious prayer, but just, God, be with our children. God, please help them to feel your love. I think just focusing on the main issues, which is what God does with us. I love you because I created you, not because of what you do. And so just praying that they would see the light of God in whatever place they're in, and that we would cling to God to come through with the promises that he has made.
And I would remind myself that the story's not over yet, that story's in the middle. And also, I remember we read something together not too long ago that said a long-awaited change can happen suddenly. Like, I think of last time I'm going to mention the prodigal son, but the father watched for days, for months, maybe for years, every day looking, and then suddenly it happened, like in a moment. So I would say you may be waiting for a long time for a sudden change, and that's okay. But I would remind myself all the time, God is not done. The story is not done because God is always working.
Yeah. That's a good reminder, even for us in our own lives with anything that we're walking through. That's great. Well, we're really grateful that you guys took the time to be here and talk through just a delicate and hard topic.
You guys are so good. That's why we keep having you back.
Thank you.
This has been Parenting for the Everyday. Tune in next time.